welcome to the February 2023 episode of Money Mountaineering with actuary and author Peter Neuwirth, F.S.A, F.C.A, who asked the question, what's your future worth? I'm Hope Katz-Gibbs, producer of the show on the Incandescent Radio Network and Incandescent TV. Thrilled to be here today with our guest, Steve Vernon, F.S.A, who is president of Rest of Life Communications. Steve says, for the next phase of my life, I want to help people make important retirement planning decisions so they can live long and prosper. We are so excited to have you here today, Steve. So I'm going to throw it over to Pete to conduct our fabulous interview. Take it away.
Well, thanks so much, Hope. And thank you, Steve. I mean, this is really a thrill. I mean, you are the guy I really wanted to have on this show right from the beginning, because in many ways, you've been an inspiration to me. I mean, when we were working together, I remember when we were working together at Watson Wyatt, you were writing that book called Live Long and Prosper. And I, being a Star Trek fan, of course, I related very much to it and to your approach to things. And I guess I'd like to just start by, what's been your journey from that point? I mean, I kind of lost touch for a while after that book came out and you went on. So what happened?
Well, you and I were on the front lines of plan sponsors and employers transitioning from traditional pension plans to 401k plans. And that's where we worked together at Watson Wyatt. And I knew all along why employers didn't want to sponsor traditional pension plans anymore. They didn't like the risk that they were assuming. So what did they do? They terminated their pension plan and passed that risk off to their employees. And so I thought, this is placing a lot of responsibility on employees to decide how much to save and how to invest that money. And then when they get to retirement, deciding if they have enough and what they're going to do with that money. I retired from Watson Wyatt in 2006, more than 16 years ago, to embark on what we now call an encore career, taking my experience and my skills to really focus on helping people as they approach their retirement and enter into retirement, managing their finances in a world where they're more responsible than they used to be.
Well, yeah. And you mentioned the fact of all that shift from DB to DC, which of course, we both went through and helped companies do that. And what I recall about all that period is that in some sense, employers were pushing on an open door because employees wanted control of their money and they wanted access to it. And but I guess, be careful what you wish for is sort of the takeaway I have from that.
Well, right. And I think both employers and employees didn't think this all the way through. And this is an important theme for actuaries, is that we do tend to think things all the way through. But both the employees wanted to see the value of their money now in their 30s and 40s, and that makes sense. They're focused on accumulating money. But you start entering into retirement, and you should really start focusing in on generating lifetime retirement income. And that's a perspective you really don't gain until you get into your 50s. And so that's what I've been about, is helping people understand this transition into retirement and all the risks that they can face and how to address those risks.
Well, in some ways you're a more pragmatic guy than me, because I look at that and I think, oh yeah, well, what's the flip side of accumulation? It's decumulation. Now that's really the problem that we're facing, is decumulation. And there's a lot of theoretical solutions, but what are some of the practical risks that you see facing somebody that's trying to decumulate their assets?
Okay, well, and we'll get into this about my theory of a broad definition of longevity risk and a narrow definition. But the narrow definition of longevity risk is outliving your money. And that's indeed an important risk to address. It's just you're not done when you address that risk. And so what someone who's entering into retirement, they have a lump sum of money in their 401k or their IRA, and they've got to decide what they're going to do with that and how to make that last the rest of their life, no matter how long they live. And so that's the challenge that we face. And in a general sense, I think I'm advocating that people shift their thinking from accumulating a pile of money, a portfolio of assets, to generating a portfolio of retirement income. And you've got to shift your thinking. And that's what I've been all about, is how do you shift your thinking to develop a portfolio, a diversified portfolio. And just like a diversified portfolio of assets has, each category has different features and different characteristics. It's the same thing with the portfolio of diversified retirement income. Each source of income has its own characteristics, and you want to be diversified. So that's really what my shift in thinking has been about.
That's right. In fact, I mean, you and I worked together on a white paper. I think you published a while ago for the Society of Actuaries, and I know in those conversations we were talking about the various assets that people have when they retire, and one of the not talked about much asset is the present value of your future earnings as a, and compared to the 401k, it may not be as big as the 401k, depending on your health and so forth, but I don't think people are thinking so much about, they think of retirement as a either or, and it's really not an either or, is it?
Well, it's not. And also, I think thinking of retirement as an either or is a frame of mind you have before you get there. And I can tell you, once you get into those retirement years, you start having a broader view. And so I know a lot of people my age and older who are still working part-time. They may have retired and they had kind of a retirement honeymoon for a couple of years. And then they realized, oh, I need more money, And so they started looking for how they can make some income. But let me just make one more point, if you don't mind,
sure.
is that if you're someone in your early 60s, and let's suppose you have a partner or you're married, and if you have above average education and above average income, which is probably our audiences here, it's easy. It's highly likely that one of you is going to live another 30 years into your early 90s. And so living solely on financial resources for 30 years is in my view, a very risky proposition. A lot can go wrong in 30 years. And so you end up concluding, oh, maybe I should work longer than I had previously thought, but how do I do this in a way that lets me enjoy life more?
Right. Well, one of the things that I remember from one of your books is the way you broke up the retirement, the years of retirement into the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. So can you talk a little bit about how that fits into your whole revenue income generating model?
Sure. And I wasn't the one that coined that phrase. I just picked it up from somebody else. I thought it was pretty clever, though. So the go-go years, you're still active, you're still vital, you're still healthy, and you could probably still work. But it's also could be the time when you're most likely to travel and pursue interests. And so I think that's the key to reflect on during what we're calling the go-go years. What's the right balance between working and enjoying life more? And for people, those go-go years could be anywhere until your mid-70s to your mid-80s, possibly, if you're really healthy and fit. But what we're seeing also, let me say, is that if you look at patterns of how retirees spend money over their complete lifetime, we're seeing actually some statistical confirmation of the go-go, no-go, go-go, slow-go, and no-go, is that people tend to spend more money in the early years of the retirement. And that's the go-go years. They tend to spend less money in the slow-go, which you're just not as active and vigorous as you used to be, but you're not yet incurring huge bills for medical or long-term care. And then that spending ramps back up again in your final years. And so I think that high spending, going down to low spending and going back to higher spending kind of reflects the go-go, slow-go, and no-go years, because it is inevitable you'll be spending more money on medical and long-term care in your final years of life.
Well, but it also highlights how there's another aspect to income generation or what you take. It's also a budgeting thing. I mean, understanding how your expenses are going to change over time and your capacity to either work or even manage that money over time sounds like it's a heck of a challenge.
Well, right. And speaking of managing your money, that was one of my projects at the Stanford Center on Longevity, is we developed a toolkit for people to have their finances managed in their later years when they're not quite as sharp as they used to be. And an interesting statistic to throw out there is that people aged 75 to 79, about 1 in 5 have some kind of diminished decision-making capacity. Doesn't mean they have Alzheimer's or dementia, it's just diminished. And that goes up to 1 out of 2 in your 80s. And yet people are still managing their money during that time. And they're much more vulnerable to financial losses, either to making mistakes or becoming a victim of fraud or exploitation. And so that's one of several risks that we advocate people think about as they transition into retirement. And I think a lot of baby boomers had wake-up calls watching their parents go through this phase. And so that's one of the several aspects I've been working on.
Yeah, I mean, I also am a big believer in knowing your advisor really well. Do your due diligence, because, you know, there's a lot of advisors who are about like, know your client. But do you have some tips for the person contemplating retirement who doesn't have a lot of money to hire advisors? How should they look for someone?
Okay. And actually, I've got a paper out on my website out there called Get Help.
Right.
And it's a good question. And I advise people to look at least 2 aspects. And first is, what are their experience and their credentials? And what is often not known is that to get the common professional credentials as an advisor's, all these credentials are focused on accumulating money. And they haven't focused as much on spending in retirement. And there are a set of specialized credentials, additional credentials you can get that have formal training on drawdown strategies and Social Security and all these risks we're talking about. So I would suggest look for those additional credentials if you can.
Okay.
So that's one thing to look at. And the other is how they're paid. And I really would like people to get paid, advisors to be paid in a way that doesn't create biases in their recommendations. And my least favorite way to get paid is through some kind of a sales commission, because then they might be trying to sell something that makes them the most commission. There's a conflict of interest. Now, I'm not saying everybody's that's paid that way is going to act unethically, but the temptation is there.
Right.
And so I'd rather see, ideally, actually, in my view, the best way to pay your advisor is by the hour or by the project, just like you'd pay your accountant or your lawyer, because that actually is the cleanest way to pay somebody without having any biases. But as a practical matter, a lot of advisors charge a % of assets under management, and that's okay. But they have some conflicts as well, because they want to have the most money under management, and they aren't likely to tell you to go buy an annuity. So this is part of your homework, and your due diligence is to spend time selecting your financial advisor. And actually, I'd call that a retirement advisor, which is more than just a financial advisor.
Right. Right. So we only got a few minutes left, but I really want to shift to a question that's, I mean, you and I are, well, I guess maybe we look really young, but we're both retirement age, and we have both had to recently address exactly one of the questions you were talking about, is when to take Social Security. And this is, I guess this is, you can listen to both of us because we have different approaches. I personally took my Social Security as soon as I hit my normal retirement age, but you did not. Can you talk a little bit about your thought process and whether if you were as young as I was, you would do what I just did or not?
Okay. Well, yeah, let me tell you what I did. My reasons is that I am delaying my Social Security until the maximum age 70. And actually, May 1st, of 2023, it's coming in. And so I've been waiting for that. And the reasons, you can look at decisions or analyze decisions from a financial perspective, but also kind of in a psychological and decision-making perspective. And there's plenty of evidence that for the vast majority of people, the best financial decision is to delay until age 70. That's one set of decision-making. Now, some people will say, oh, but Social Security is going to be cut in about the year 2033 or 34 because our Congress is not going to fund up the benefits and we might get a 25% haircut. I've done the math there. Even if you assume that'll happen, delaying till age 70 is still better because it's still going to happen to you. If they have a 25% cut, it's going to happen whether you start at 66 or 70. Only the cut is applying to a bigger number if you wait till 70.
Right.
And so those are the financial reasons, but also go into the psychological reasons and actually the longevity reasons. Because if my wife and I are lucky enough that we live into our 90s and we're less able to make decisions, having a bigger Social Security benefit coming in is better than not. And so that's actually dealing with what actuaries call the tail end of risk.
Right.
Is that I'm a lot more worried about that tail end than if I die in my 80s or 70s. I'm dead. I don't have to worry about those risks anymore. So
Right.
I want to take care of that tail end of risk. And I can do that by delaying my Social Security until age 70.
Well, that's great. Okay. Well, I think that's, I guess I'm having a little bit of buyer's regret, but not too much for having to turn it on. And I think we're about ready to wrap up. So your latest book is Don't Go Broke in Retirement and Rest of Life Communication. But can I just ask you, what's next? I mean, you're still in the go-go years. So what do you got planned for the future?
Well, it's interesting, hitting age 70 and being able to start my Social Security benefit, up until recently, it was kind of an intellectual thing, but now it's becoming real. And I'm talking with myself and my wife about, I've worked in retirement since I was age 22. Maybe I should think about being retired, But fortunately, in the business that I've selected for myself, we could turn the dial. So my plan is just to turn the dial down a little bit and turn the dial of traveling and seeing grandkids and others up a bit, but just kind of be open to new possibilities.
Yeah, well, as long as you don't disappear completely from the retirement consulting and financial planning world, that's okay by me. So, but anyway, I just want to thank you again, Steve. This has really been fantastic to have you on, and best of luck to you in your retirement and your semi-retirement or your non-retirement or whatever comes next.
Well, Pete, it's been a pleasure, and it's good to reconnect again with you. So thank you very much for having me, and thanks to your audience for listening to us.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve Vernon, F.S.A. President of Rest of Life Communications and author of Don't Go Broke in Retirement, A Simple Plan to Build Lifetime Retirement Income. You are watching and listening to the February 2023 episode of Money Mountaineering with actuary and author Peter Neuwirth, who asked the question, what's your future worth? Thank you, Pete, and thanks to our audience. Please tune in next month when Pete will interview award-winning certified financial planner Margarita Cheng, who is host of the weekly financial podcast and video show Margaritas with Margarita, and author of the new book, Diary of a CFP Pro. I'm Hope Katz-Gibbs, producer of the show on the Incandescent Radio Network and Incandescent TV. Have a great month, and we'll see you all soon.